just wanted to say before we get going, do you mind, like I said, this is my first time coming into the Highlands Nature Center. Do you want to talk a little bit about this office and kind of what the reason behind this facility being built is?
Well, Arkansas Game and Fish has never really had a footprint in Northwest Arkansas. We had a regional office that was up at Beaver Dam that was not well utilized by the public because it's an hour and a half drive from Fayetteville, hour drive from Bentonville. It's a long distance. And it was just mainly office space. And so with a growing population of Northwest Arkansas, the Arkansas Game and Fish wanted to get a footprint into Northwest Arkansas, have something to offer other than just our normal game wardens and our regional education people. So we went into the city of Springdale and spoke with the mayor and the water department who used to own this property and discussed the possibility of getting this land, and they donated it to the Game and Fish for the purpose of building a nature center. Okay. And so Miss Hunt donated $5 million towards the building of this property, and the Game and Fish Foundation did some fundraising and donated some money. So we were able to get this building built, and they're continually adding to it. They've just added a playground out there. We had the 3D range. There's the maintenance buildings, and they're continually just changing up some of the programming here. But we have probably about 10 employees total here between the education and operations staff.
Okay.
And I have an office here. My lieutenant has an office here. So we have a little bit of an enforcement presence here, but it's mainly just our office staff. This is mainly what we do here.
Okay.
And it's we have the archery center over there. They do BB gun shoots and archery, so it gets utilized by a lot of different groups. Have school groups come through here during the school year, and a lot of different camps come through here during the summer. So it gets quite a bit of use. And when it opened up, it was during COVID. So everything was shut down, so it was kind of a slow rolling start. But
kind of an anticlimactic. Like we're opening this awesome facility, but it's hard to get.
It is definitely catching up. There's a lot more people coming in here every day now.
Cool. Well, we just were walking through and saw your office, and even you said the quail enclosure is kind of newly finished, and I was walking by and saw I don't know, what are there, 10 quail in there? I
think they said there's 15 quail in there right now.
Just kind of walking around, and that's really cool to see. It's not every day you get to see quail just cruising around, walking, doing their thing.
Yeah, that's part of the wildlife management is doing a restoration area here. They're showing different areas of how to maintain property to help help out the quail population. So this is kind of a demonstration area, and having quail in the area just adds to it. You come out here in the evening and start hearing whistling, so it adds a little bit of you get to see quail out here where you don't get to see them normally every other day.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
So it's like native grasses, prime quail habitat, what you're looking for when it comes to property management.
Yes.
That's what you're getting out there. I'm going to take a walk through that after this.
And there's some trails, right? We could totally go walk.
There's trails out there. There's part of the Ozark or the Springdale Greenway.
Okay. Yeah.
They have they just finished up their walk out there, and it eventually will connect over to Shaw Park. I think at some point they're going to build some more of that, but you can take it. You can actually park here and take the Greenway over to Lake Springdale, and then you can go turn north or south and go up to Bentonville or down to Fayetteville.
Oh, cool.
Very nice. Very cool. Well, it is a very cool venue. Like I said, we don't get to record in such a nice facility all the time. Sometimes we're in shacks. Sometimes we're alongside the river, and we always enjoy it. But this is definitely, the AC is nice. I'm enjoying it on a hot July day like today. But to start, I wanted, before I get going, what should I call you? Because it's not every day we get to introduce a captain on the podcast.
Everybody calls me Bill.
Just Bill? Captain Bill or just Bill?
Just Bill.
Okay. So, Bill, I want to just start with maybe just explain the role of a game warden and the significance in the realm of conservation and kind of what it is that a game warden does.
Well, the whole purpose of the Game and Fish is to manage the resources of the state of Arkansas for everybody to enjoy. Wildlife management, they look at how to properly manage the wildlife and hunting in the state of Arkansas. Our fisheries division looks at the fish populations and how to properly manage waters for fishing. They propose those regulations. The commission approves it, and then it goes becomes our regulations. The enforcement arm, it's our job to enforce those regulations that they pass. So what we're here to do is we're not the ones that are out there making the rules, but we have to ensure that everybody is following by the rules that are set out. So if we go out and as part of your introduction, you're saying that everybody is nervous. 99% of the time when we're talking to somebody that we have nothing to do as far as writing tickets.
Yeah.
We'll talk to people out on the water. We check people out fishing. 99% of the people we run across completely legal, have no problems. And so it's the rarity that we actually end up having to write citations if you go by just the general numbers of people we run across. But yes, that part of our job is to ensure that everybody is following regulations, and if they're not, then we write them citations to basically get people back into compliance, following regulations to ensure that they're not taking over the limit of fish or game to hurt the populations, making sure that they're doing fair chase as far as hunting goes, making sure that we also do boating safety, boating regulations. So make sure that everybody's being safe out there on the water, got all their safety equipment, not operating negligently or anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is kind of, and I'm, actually now that you say that, it makes sense. You're interacting with so many people. It's not the generality that you're always writing a ticket. That makes total sense to me. For me, I think it's always like the concern that even if I know that I'm not doing anything wrong, it's always the concern that like I have forgotten that one thing, that one technical regulation, and that's just like that lives in the back of my mind. Because I'm nervous that I'm going to like slip up at some point.
Well, and everybody makes mistakes. We're not out looking to try to get somebody hemmed up on some little technical glitch.
Yeah.
It's if somebody goes out there and is willfully violating the regulations, then they can probably expect to get a ticket.
Sure.
But if it was a minor mistake that just some minor glitch, they may get a warning, may get a verbal warning, or they may get a citation. You never know what it is, but it's not our goal to go out there and write citations. Our goal is to ensure compliance with regulations. Mm-hmm. So if that means that we can go out there and get our job accomplished without writing a citation, then that's maybe what we do that day. But at the same time, if we come across somebody that is in violation that needs a citation, then we're not afraid to do that either.
Yeah. You lay the law down.
Yeah.
I like it. We need those guys. So what made you want to be a game warden? Talk to me about, was it something that someone else maybe in your family or someone that you talked to like inspired you to do it? Or was it just something that you always kind of wanted to do yourself?
I grew up hunting and fishing. My grandpa used to hunt with him. I used to fish with my dad a lot. Had always hunted and fished basically when I was growing up. And I'd always, in the back of my mind, wanted to be a game warden. Growing up. And then I went to college at U of A, got a degree in biology, and really wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. But they had just passed, the state of Arkansas just passed a 1/8 1% sales tax.
Okay, yeah.
And so they started hiring a lot of wildlife officers at that point. We were wildlife officers back then, now we're game wardens. So they hired a lot of game wardens and to fill in all the empty positions they had across the state. Because generally all of our counties have 2 officers. Some of them have 3, but most of them have 2. And
Okay.
So at the time, they were filling in 18 to 20 positions per cadet class. And it just happened that when I graduated college, they were hiring. So I went ahead and applied and got hired. And I figured if I liked it, I'll stay here for a year. If I didn't like it, stay here for a year, then I go figure out something else to do. But if I liked it, I'll stay here. And I'm in 26 years right now. So
Very cool.
been here a while.
Did you have a backup plan? Were you like, I'm going to be a police officer or some kind of law enforcement? Or
I really wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Just I'd figure it out as it went.
Very cool.
Was it your love for hunting and fishing, conservation, just the outdoors in general?
I think it was my dislike of being in an office all day more than anything.
Better. So it's a combination of the two.
Yes.
Don't want to live in an office all day, but also really love being outside. And I care about this stuff.
That's the thing is I love to hunt and fish, and I always thought that this would be a great job because I could hunt and fish all the time. The problem is that when hunting season is here, that's your busy time of the year, so you don't get to hunt nearly as much as you used to. When fishing's really good, that's our busy time. We're out checking fishermen, and so we don't get to fish as much. It does add to the fact that you're not in an office all day, and there's parts of this job change every 3 months. So, for instance, come January, we have a little bit of fishing going on then. It's not a whole lot, but there's some in this area. Over in East Arkansas, it's mainly duck hunting. And then you come into March and April, that's turkey season starts firing up. So we're out checking turkey hunters. And then May, June, and July, you get boaters, and then August rolls around, you start looking for dove fields, and then September, October, November is hunting season. So about every 3 months, the job changes. It's not the same year after day. It's every 3 months there's something else going on.
Well, I found that no job lets you hunt or fish as much as you'd like.
No.
At least you're in good company.
Yeah, that's true. So is that what you typically see with people who are coming in as cadets and coming into who want to be a game warden? Is it typically the same kind of thing? The inspiration being, I don't want to be in an office. I love being outside hunting and fishing. This feels like something that might be a good fit.
Well, and it's also, there's a public service component to it. They have to have the want to be a public servant.
Okay.
And
what do you mean by that?
Well, it's, for instance, one of my officers got a call last night about 10 o'clock that a boat had hit a stump and their engine broke, and they had no way of getting back to the ramp. So he went out there to go help out with that. And I mean, if you work at a business, they call up at 10 p.m. saying, "Hey, this happened." Most of the time they'll handle it the next day.
Yeah.
Whereas as a public servant, you're out there helping out 10 p.m., 1 a.m. I mean, we're on the clock for 5 days a week, 24 hours a day. There's something there. You're responsible for calls any time during those 5 days. And a lot of your days change. A lot of your days off change. So, as a game warden, a field officer, your days off are either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Thursday. You work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Nearly everybody does.
Okay.
And so, I mean, you can take vacation and be off those days if you have something going on, but those are your main work days because that's when everybody's out in the field.
Yeah.
So, you have to have a desire to want to be a public servant in order to do this job, because it's more than just going in, clocking in, and going out and checking hunting fishing license. There is a component to have to want to go out there and serve the public in order to do this job.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think about, in my job, if someone were to email me or, text me at 10 p.m. and they need that spreadsheet right now, there's not a chance in the world that I'm sending that. Short of a huge emergency, which I can't even imagine, but that totally makes sense. What about the training it takes to become a game warden? What goes into that, and what does the process look like?
The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has their own cadet school. So it's in Mayflower on Game and Fish property. The officers, they show up there. It's I think 20 weeks is what it is right now. So they show up there Sunday night at, I believe, 8 p.m., and they don't go home until 5 p.m. on Friday. They're cut loose to go home for the weekend, and then they're show back up on Sunday night. And they are there. They stay there every night. They have classroom all day. We have survival swimming classes. We have PT every morning. We have firearms training. We have boat operation. We have vehicle operation, ATV operation. We don't just drive trucks. We drive boats. We drive four-wheelers. We drive like big bay boats. We drive flat bottoms. Some of them, there's even a couple of airboats in this game of fish. So a little bit of everything. Have training on operating all those things. We have training on maintenance of those items as well. Then we have a lot of classrooms training our radio operation. We have to do wild game identification. We have to do fish identification. Migratory birds, a lot of your ducks, you have to be able to identify properly. So there's a lot that goes into it, just a lot of classroom time, but it's 20 weeks of training, and they're there for 20 weeks straight.
20 weeks.
Yeah.
You say they get to go home on the weekend, but throughout the rest of the week, they're there.
They're there,
staying
Sunday through Friday.
Wow. That's an extensive
It
bit
is.
of training there.
It is. And I mean, there's some dead time in there, but the vast majority of it is there's something going on at basically from 6 a.m. PT starts at 5:30, 6 a.m. and runs until you've got classroom, then you've got firearms qualifications. We have to go out and qualify at night as well. So you'll have firearms training at night. We have vehicle stops, operation at night, just a little bit of everything. So they may not get back to their dorms until 10 p.m. that night.
Yeah.
And
golly, that's a long
then
day.
back out in the mornings.
That is a long day.
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason, do you think, or I mean, I'm sure as a game warden, what is the reason behind the extent of the training? Why is it necessary that you need to be able to do and know all of those things, when it comes to vehicles, firearms, training at night, in the water? What is the reason behind the intensiveness of that?
Well, that's just part. I mean, if you're operating a boat, there's always a possibility you're going to fall out of a boat. I've been thrown out of a boat before, And when you get thrown out of a boat, you have a gun belt on, you have boots, you're in pants, you were in shirt. You have to be able to swim in order to survive. And so they teach you how to utilize the tools you have in hand in order to survive. We all, like I said, we don't just drive vehicles. We drive trucks, ATVs, boats, whatever. So you have to be able to use all those tools properly. You have to be able to. There's an ATV. They're not the most stable things out there. They're easily flipped.
Yeah.
So there's some people may have never driven one in their life coming into this job. And so we have to be able to train them in order to basically ensure that they're not going to go out there and hurt themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just giving out the proper training for that. We see all different aspects of the state in this job. So back when I was a field officer, I was stationed up here, but I may go to East Arkansas and work the duck hunters over at Biomeda for 3 or 4 days. So we don't have a whole lot of duck hunting up here, but I still have to know what's going on with duck hunting, with duck regulations. So I'll go down there and work. We have commercial fishing over in East Arkansas. We have alligator season down in South Arkansas. We have elk hunting up here that nowhere else in the state has.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different regulations that everybody has to understand, that even though you don't see it every day, you still have to be fairly familiar with. And I get questions all the time of, hey, when's duck season start up? Well, we don't have a whole lot of duck hunting up here, but I still need to know some of the different regulations. What's the regulations on tagging alligators? Some of those things I have to know. If I don't know it off the top of my head, I have to be like, well, I'll find out.
Yeah.
And I know where to look it up at. So it's being familiar with all different aspects of what you're going to encounter in this job, because it's not the same every day.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of examples of kind of being out in the field and kind of having to know something like that, and just in general, stories as a game warden and when you're interacting with people, I'm sure you see a lot of different things, some crazy, probably some unbelievable. You probably run into a fair amount of good people, but then a fair amount of people who they don't mean well, and they know that they're doing something illegal. And what have been some of the more memorable moments in your career, as far as maybe something that's like, this is the reason why that I'm a game warden, to stop things like this?
I had a case. It's been probably 20 years ago. I had initially got a tip of a family that was killing a lot of deer. And so I got a tip about it. We started investigating a little bit on it. And I didn't have a whole lot of information at first, but it was luck of the draw that some of the things happened that all of a sudden information started popping up. I had a tip that there was a guy that was killing just a ton of deer. I think I ended up figuring out he'd killed about 76 in 1 year.
No,
my
way.
goodness.
And so,
all on the same property, or
no,
just
it
around?
was just all over the place. It was road hunting, night hunting, hunting out of season, just all kinds of different violations.
Oh, gosh.
And so I got a tip off that and started doing some investigation, interviewed a couple people, and it didn't get a whole lot of places at first. And then I had a guy call me up and said, man, it was the weirdest thing. Beaver Lake was really, really high when I first started that investigation, and they started dropping the lake. He said, I was out at Hickory Creek, and out there on the cliff, there was 3 or 4 boxes full of deer deer antlers out there. The skull cap's been cut off, and it still had the tags on it from where the place had cut the antlers off. And I said, let me come out there and take a look at it. So I went out there and took a look, and the antlers matched up to some of the tags I had on some of these other antlers this guy had been killing.
Okay.
And so I did a little more investigation, found out what was going on. He was killing these deer and taking it to a taxidermist who was getting credit towards the capes, and the capes off these deer were getting credit towards him getting deer mounted, and then he would turn around and sell the mounts later.
Oh, so they were colluding a little bit.
Well, at the time, we did not have any regulations as far as really picking up roadkill deer. And so he was taking all these deer to the taxidermist under the guise of, these are roadkill I just picked up. And I mean, there had to be some kind of, I would have asked questions if I was a taxidermist, but regulations have since changed, and that's now they have to tag them, but so we have a record of what's going on. But at the time,
you have to tag roadkill deer.
We have roadkill tags, so they have to call it in and they have to report where the deer was, what it is, their information, so that they can provide them a roadkill tag number. The deer has to be tagged, and so that we have information, and a record of where this deer came from and what happened. So if we have somebody that's picked up 30 roadkill deer over the past 6 months, we probably might want to look at that person because, you might see 30 roadkill deer on the road, but most of them have been run over so many times you wouldn't want to pick them up.
You don't want to touch them.
So, so after I talked to that, I went and talked to the taxidermist where I suspected this was happening at, and sure enough, got a name, and then got a name of some other people that were involved. And it just happened that one of the people was on probation, so called up the probation officer and said, "Hey, what do you know about this?" He said, "Well, I've got to go over there and do an inspection here next tomorrow. If you want to come along, come on." And so I went with them, and sure enough, found a bunch of evidence over there at the house, and about 5 of the family members there at the house, including a couple felons who were not supposed to have weapons, and there was weapons inside the house. So we had a little bit of leverage on investigations, and ended up writing about. I think altogether about 50 or 60 citations in the long run. It was about a 6-month process.
Wow.
But altogether, I think ended up about $25,000 in fines, several guns, all the antlers were all lost. So it was a big investigation. It didn't completely put an end to it because we had a report of that same family a couple of years later that got them for killing a couple elk out of season. So
no way.
You
think that'd be enough to make you really learn your lesson?
You would think so, but the fact of the matter is we will never completely stop poaching, but we can slow it down when we're out there. And so all the years I've worked, I know that we'll never stop it, but we can slow it down as much as we can. So there's things like that. When I first went to work, I had been working about a year, and I was over in East Arkansas. I was in Marianna, Arkansas. And the Mississippi River was part of my territory over there. So
Okay.
I was working on the Mississippi River that day with another new officer that had gone to work with me. We'd been working right at a year. And we were on the Mississippi River, and we were going up to Memphis.
So you guys are fresh on the job pretty much.
Been out for about a year.
Okay.
And we were in a 17-foot War Eagle flat bottom, and we were driving up the river, and we were about 5 miles south of Memphis, and looked over, and I said, "Is that a head floating in the water?" And he said, "I thought too." So we pulled back around, and it was a human head sitting there.
No way.
And the thing is, about that time, it just started moaning, and it scared us to death.
Oh.
And what happened was, we pulled him out of the water, and he was wearing a jean jacket. The only thing that saved him, because he tried to commit suicide, jumped off the I-55 bridge out of Memphis, hit the water, and this is about 120, 140-foot drop. It knocked him out. But his jean jacket got an air bubble in the back of it, kept him afloat. That's the only way he was saved.
Oh my goodness.
And it was during, I think, March, so it was still pretty cold. The water is in the 50s or 60s. It was chilly.
Yeah.
Pulled him out of the water and took him up to the harbor patrol there in Memphis and dropped him off. And they said, "Well, we had a report that somebody was on the bridge about to jump about an hour ago. We went out there and just never found anything." And we just happened to we weren't looking for it. We were just driving down the river, and sure enough, here's a guy floating out there in the river.
Found him.
It was just
my goodness.
some of those. There's some just, you never know what you're going to come across out there.
That's like
bizarre.
the definition of public servant right there, too.
I mean, I'll be completely honest. When I saw the head floating out there and it started moaning, it freaked me out.
I believe it.
Because I assume you're walking up and you're like, "Oh, this guy's dead."
Oh, we were out there in the middle of the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
I mean, we were a half mile from the bank. I mean, there was you would never expect to see that floating out there in the middle of the river.
Never.
And the water is so muddy you can't see down more than an inch or two, so it's not, you couldn't see anything under the water.
Yeah.
But it was just like I said, there was just riding down the river at 50 miles an hour, and then look over and there's this floating out there.
That would freak me out.
You
for
never
sure.
know what you're going to come across in a day at this job.
No, you don't. What about fishing? Like, I'm just curious. You mentioned a hunting one, maybe a fishing story of being out and maybe someone who's just like grossly overcaught their limit or something like that.
Well, there's nothing really sticks out in my mind. I've been doing this job so long that everything kind of all blends in.
Yeah, sure.
I remember when on the Mississippi River, there was no limit on crappie inside the levees. There was no limit on size limit or number limit. And I take it back. It was 50 per person over there, but there was no size limit. And so
that's a lot.
yeah, there was a Oxbow River I'd gone on over there. And or Oxbow Lake, and I was pulled up on this lake, and there was a party barge out there on this little bitty. The lake was not more than 100 yards across, maybe 2 miles long. And pulled up over there, and there was a boat, a pontoon boat, small pontoon boat, had 4 people on it. And I talked to them. I said, y'all doing any good today? Oh, yeah, we're catching a bunch of fish. And I said, where are you keeping them at? And they had 4 big coolers. And these were big the igloo coolers, probably 50 or 60 quart.
Okay.
They opened them up, and there was probably 500 to 600 crappie inside these coolers.
Oh, man.
And I remember thinking, it's going to take me forever to count these things. So I started having them each count out their 50 crappie. And whenever at the end of that day, I ended up donating, I think, 300 to 400 crappie to some families around the county out there, just because that's how far they were over.
Wow.
And they each got tickets grossly over the limit. But it was just, I mean, there had to be nearly 700 crappie on that boat that day.
Just from how many guys were fishing?
Four guys on this boat.
They were tearing it up.
What were they going to do with all of them?
Most of them weren't more than 5 or 6 inches long. They're little bitty fish. They're keeping everything they caught.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God.
Have you seen that change? Even the kind of the attitude towards fishing and maybe even hunting of like people who grew up generationally. You keep what you shot and you caught no matter what.
You know,
it's the conservation side.
To the point now of back when I first went to work, we had a lot more night hunting and hunting out of season went on.
Some of that's cultural, I imagine.
Well, that was cultural. Part of it was cultural, but it was also a lot of it was a lot more difficult to go out and kill deer back 25, 30 years ago.
Sure.
Right.
There's so many deer in the state of Arkansas now, and the regulations have changed so much that, I mean, back then the season was over in East Arkansas was like 4 days long. That was it. Your gun season was 4 days.
Wow.
Now your season up here is you got a nearly a month of gun season. You have bow season starts in September. If you want to go out and kill a deer, you have nearly 6 months to go out and kill a deer. If you really want to buckle down and kill deer, it is not that difficult. And back then it was, you killed 2 bucks and that was it. Now you have up to 6 deer, 2 bucks, and up to 4 does, or up to 6 does, depending on where you hunt at and how you hunt. The regulations have gotten so much easier to go out and kill deer and catch fish that really there's not as much desire of people to go out and violate, because it's just as easy to go out and do it legally now.
Right.
And our regulations, the population supports it. Our regulations allow it. There's the hunting population there's not as many people hunting now as there used to be. So the deer population keeps getting bigger and there's less people out there hunting them. So it's easier and easier to kill deer if you want to go out and kill deer.
Yeah, there's no reason to do it illegally.
Back when I was in high school, there was a lot of people go out and do squirrel camps. When I first went to work, it was nothing to go out the first week of September and check 15 or 20 different squirrel camps, maybe check 150, 200 people. I hadn't seen a squirrel camp in probably 5 years. It's rare.
Squirrel camps just go hunt squirrels.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's people that go camp out for the weekend, opening weekend of squirrel season. That all camp out, just big groups of people, and then they go squirrel hunt all morning and camp out all afternoon. Well, now it's not, you don't see very many people out squirrel hunting anymore.
You just
rabbit hunters, you see some of them, but not very many. Duck hunting and deer hunting is still pretty big, but some of your other hunting, there's just not the number of population out there, people out there doing it as there used to be. Fishing, Beaver Lake is kind of a different lake. It's not like Bull Shoals. It's not like Table Rock. It's not. Table Rock, you have Branson right there next to it, but we have Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Bentonville, all within 20-minute drive of Beaver Lake. People can go out there on the lake every afternoon if they want to.
Yeah.
So there's always people on Beaver Lake.
Right.
I mean, always.
Right.
Some of these other lakes, I mean, they're kind of a destination. You have to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there to fish it. So those people, when they go out there, they might want to go out there and keep a lot of fish, whereas on Beaver Lake, there's a lot of just catch and release.
Sure.
We may, even crappie fishermen out there on the lake, they may go out there and catch them and throw them all back because they don't want to mess with they don't want to keep them and clean them. They just enjoy catching them and throw them back. Bass fishermen, it's mainly catch and release, so you don't see a whole lot of bass getting kept. Then we have the trout stream up at Beaver Tailwaters. Nearly all the people we check up there regularly are catch and release. We'll see some keep them, but I mean, and that's part of the fishery that's part of the way it's managed is we realize there are going to be people keeping fish, and that's fine. That's what they're there for.
Within the slot, you're good to go.
As long as they're following regulations, that's what they're there for. But we don't see the number of people keeping those fish. It's kind of a renewable resource because they catch them, throw them back, and then they may catch them again 6 months later.
Yeah, every time I go over there and fish, my mother-in-law is like bring me back some. I was like, I don't want to mess with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like catching them. I'll bring them back, once a year kind of deal.
Right.
But I know we have some more questions. Kyle's got a whole lineup, but before we get into some of the other stories or gray areas and all that kind of stuff, are there any stories you're allowed to share of like undercover work, kind of big multi-unit busts, anything like that you've seen or been around, like just the types of stories that, I mean, we get excited about because you don't get to hear about them until they're done and completed.
In this area, we get a lot of, we assist Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma quite a bit on cases. Kansas is known for big deer. And so we get calls about, hey, there's this deer get killed up in Kansas, coming from Kansas Game Warden. Hey, can you go talk to this person and interview him? Well, it's been several years ago. A guy had killed a really, really big buck. It was distinctive. It was like 180, 190 inch deer. It was big. And he posted a picture and said it was killed over in Benton County. Ooh. But the problem is that the neighboring landowners to him in Kansas, it was just dumb luck that he took it to a taxidermist, and taxidermist had posted up pictures, said, hey, this deer was killed in Benton County. Well, one of the neighboring landowners to him in Kansas saw the pictures and said that deer was killed in Kansas. It was not Arkansas deer.
He recognized it.
And he recognized the antlers because it was so distinctive. And so sent the pictures to us, and we had started investigating it. And after a long, drawn-out investigation with Kansas, with us, some DNA sampling on the deer, and they found the land where it's killed at up there, and matched up the pictures to the background in the pictures that the neighboring landowner had. It was finally admitted that the deer had been killed up there out of season, brought back to Arkansas, checked in as being Arkansas deer because he had another deer up there that he wanted to kill. It was a bigger than this one, and Kansas was a one buck zone up there, so he would have been done in that area. So it was. I think he ended up paying about $10,000 in restitution to Kansas over that case. Lost his hunting license, lost the deer. Mm-hmm. It was a lot for that for one deer, but the cases like that. We've actually have an alligator here now that is a part of an educational display
here at the Nature Center.
Mm-hmm. It came from a subject in Springdale that we had reports that had an alligator illegally.
Like as a pet?
Had it in. He just liked keeping reptiles, and had an alligator in his garage in an aquarium, and we got reports of it. And what was strange was I had arrested the same subject about 10 years ago.
Really?
And so for the exact same thing. He
for
had
an alligator?
Yeah, alligator back then.
And he had an aquarium in his garage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so,
is it a big aquarium? Like,
the alligator's only about 2.5 feet. It's not. It was not a big.
I'm thinking like a huge, almost crocodile.
So it was investigated. I arrested him back then. He went to court, pled guilty, paid a pretty good fine, and then sure enough, we got another report of it. So I had the officer go by and go talk to him, and sure enough, alligator in his garage. So he got another ticket. Alligator was forfeited. And then now they're using it as educational display up here. So it's whenever they have groups come around, one of our educational coordinators will use it as just a demonstration for different wildlife in this area.
Yeah.
But yeah, you never know what you're going to come across in this job.
Yeah.
There's something different all the time.
That is interesting. Does the alligator have a name?
I think she's named it Bart. Bart the alligator is what.
Bart the alligator, the garage alligator.
Yes.
That's funny. Man, I have something I've always heard growing up, and you see some of I know Texas has a game warden show. It's like you can watch the Rangers or game wardens kind of cruise around in Maine. There's some of those shows on like the hunting channel, outdoor channel.
There used to be one out in California, and I used to always think they have their guns drawn more than I've ever seen a game warden.
Is it realistic?
The Texas ones are a lot more realistic.
Okay.
It's because generally they are able to talk to people instead of the biggest part of this job is being able to communicate with people. Mm-hmm. So I could go out and talk to somebody, and my demeanor, how I speak to them, will determine how that conversation is going to go. If I go in there with a horrible attitude and I'm just ugly, then it's going to go one way. It's not generally going to go good.
Right.
Or I can go in there and talk to the people and treat them as equals and speak to them kindly. And even though if they're wrong, generally at the end of that whole conversation, even if I have to write them citations, we leave it on good terms.
Yeah.
They
There's like a
understand
mutual
why
respect.
they understand why they're getting the citation, the reason behind it, and how to not do violations in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so this job is all about communication. Is if you can't communicate properly with the public, then this might not be the job for you. Being able to just how you use your words is more important than being able to use your weapons.
Yeah.
Because your words can generally get you out of nearly everything.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. In terms of, I see on those shows too, and I've always heard this growing up, the amount of authority and power that a game warden has. And in some ways, I've actually heard that in some situations and circumstances, a game warden has authority to go in and confiscate things that even like a police officer doesn't necessarily have the authority to do. Is that accurate?
There's been a lot of a stretching of the truth on some of those things. We are fully we have full police authority in the state of Arkansas, and most of us are deputized by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So if we have to cross state lines, we have the authority to do that as well.
Okay.
That being said, we still can't violate somebody's civil rights. We can't go inside their house without having probable cause and a warrant. Unless they give us permission to come in. We can't just go through all their stuff out there in their boat. We still have to have probable cause to do some of those things. So, I mean, we still have to follow the Constitution. We're not going to go out there and violate somebody's civil rights. That's that doesn't make sense. Why would anybody want to go do that? I mean, that's one of the cornerstones of living in the United States is having the Constitution to fall back on. Don't go out there and violate it. It's just that easy. We're not going to do something like that. We do have the full police authority, so if we have to arrest somebody, we can. There used to always be the rumor we could just go inside somebody's house. Generally, if we go in there and we go talk to somebody and we have probable cause, we can get a warrant, or we can just say, "Hey, let's discuss this." And generally, it's like I said. However you talk to people, will generally we're able to work through situations without having to go to. We're not going to bust in somebody's door, or we can go get a warrant if we have to, or we can just discuss it and handle everything that way.
Yeah.
So we do have full police authority, but we're not going to violate somebody's civil rights in the process.
That makes sense. When it comes to like, say you suspect a vehicle has been used in a crime in terms of like spotlighting deer, or a specific firearm has been used, and you maybe have evidence that links to that firearm. Do you then need a warrant, or can you go off of probable cause to confiscate a vehicle that has blood in the bed of the truck?
If they are currently in the process of committing a violation, we can seize that vehicle, and then in order to fully search it, we would have to get a warrant to fully search it. Other than just going through and itemizing it for. Trying to think of the terminology there. Basically, to go through and just itemize everything that's in it.
Okay.
Make sure that everything's accounted for.
Yeah.
But to search something like that, we would have to get a warrant or get permission from the owner to do that.
Same with a firearm.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
It all makes sense. I feel like some of those things are things you heard from your granddad or something.
Yeah,
So like,
and
it's like, don't be a dummy.
It's the wives' tales.
Yeah.
It's like you don't know what's true or
Follow
not.
the rules.
50
If not, this could happen. You're like, okay, I'll make sure. But
Now, 50 years ago, a lot of that may have happened. I don't know, but this day and age, it's like I said, we're not going to violate somebody's civil rights over game and fish stuff. So we will follow the rule of law, and we can handle all of our stuff that way. So
Yeah.
well, at the end of the day, a mutually accountable society is healthy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to keep you accountable to holding the rules up so you don't tank our wildlife population and break the laws. And the same day, I know our law enforcement officers, they're held accountable to their rules and regulations and the Constitution. And you're like, okay, we can thrive here.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
This can work. What about the challenges as a wildlife officer or game warden that you run into in terms of, and maybe we start kind of transitioning into some of the gray areas that, I know not everything is black and white, especially when it comes to enforcement of like wildlife laws, depending on the location, depending on obviously season and time of year. Not everything is black and white, and there is a lot of gray area. How does that affect your job, and how important is it to be aware of those gray areas?
Well, it would be helpful if there was everything was defined out, but that's not feasible in all the situations. So we you have to use a lot of common sense in our job. That is, you also have to realize that if I come across something, if for instance, when I'm out there in the field, I may not be able to recite the full or code book off the top of my head, but I can see something and I know there's a violation there. But I have 3 years to investigate that, to handle that situation. So if I see there's something going on, I may collect some information about who's involved, what's going on, take some pictures just so I know I can refresh my memory. And then I may have to go back and look up more information, get some more, investigate that case a little bit more. And it may be 3 to 4 months before we're able to resolve that investigation. Or it may be maybe 2 to 3 years. And there's, like I said, not everything is black and white. There's a lot of, you have to use a lot of common sense in this job. So if I come across somebody out there that is, like on some of our wildlife management areas, national forests, the boundaries are not clearly marked everywhere.
Right.
We get a complaint that somebody's trespassing. Well, we have a regulation that states that it's illegal to hunt, fish, or trap without permission to be on somebody's property. We go out there and it's somebody that is it was an honest mistake. They've trespassed onto somebody else's property. They're not in the middle of somebody's backyard, but they may be on somebody else's hunting lease. Well, we'll go talk to the landowner and explain the situation, and it may be that they just say, okay, just tell them don't come back.
Right.
And hey, we'll handle it that way. But if at the same time, if the landowner says, I want them prosecuted and I'll be in court to testify that they did not have permission to be on my property, then we'll handle it that way as well. So you just have to use a lot of common sense. Not every situation is the same. I know one of the things that you were talking about was, for instance, water law in the state of Arkansas.
Yeah, this is something just to preface this.
It is not clear. The water law in Arkansas is not clearly defined in black and white.
Yeah, to preface that, Kyle and I, we have had some situations where we felt like we were in the right because we
You
had
gonna say this on the podcast?
Oh, absolutely. We felt like we were in the right because, it's like, oh, well, nobody owns the water. And, you always hear that. Again, it's like, I don't know if that's
Got
true
permission
or
to
not.
access from somebody else.
But now we're on different property. We're below the high water mark. It's all those things that you kind of read online or hear from somebody else. But talk to me about like, what is important to know and when are you on publicly owned water versus privately owned water?
Okay, well, in Arkansas, the problem is that the water law is not the same as Missouri, as Oklahoma, as Kansas, as Texas, as Mississippi, as Tennessee.
Okay. So that makes
everybody's laws on that are different. In Arkansas, the water is not public water unless it has been deemed a navigable waterway by either a county judge, the state legislature, a judge of some sort, or it's been federally labeled that.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, Spring Creek that runs through Springdale, if it's on public property, the city of Springdale allows people to access Spring Creek. If you want to go down there and go walk along the bank, that's the city of Springdale is fine with that in certain areas. But then let's say it goes on to private property next to it. The water is flowing. So the water, if let's say, for instance, it was 10 feet deep all the way across through there.
Yeah.
You could be in a canoe and float everywhere and not touch the bottom, not touch anything. Then you could float through there. But as soon as you touch the bottom of somebody's privately owned property, then you are technically trespassing.
Okay.
You do not have permission to be on their property. The water may be flowing. It belongs to the state of Arkansas. The property underneath that water does not belong to the state of Arkansas as private property.
So if you were to dive down in that 10 feet of water and touch the bottom,
then you would be trespassing.
You would be trespassing.
Yes.
Okay.
And see, our regulations pertain to hunting, fishing, and trapping without permission. Now that if you are not hunting, fishing, or trapping, then you would be subject to criminal trespass. The laws on criminal trespass. So
is that worse?
It's just different.
Just sounds worse, maybe.
It does sound worse. Criminal.
It does. It sounds worse. They're both misdemeanors ultimately.
Sure. Okay.
But it's just a different code. It's a state code instead of Game and Fish Code regulation.
You'd be dealing probably with a police officer versus dealing with you.
Yes. So over on Spring Creek, once it gets out of the city of Springdale, we get a lot of calls about over by the Creeks Golf Course on Highway 112. People are over there. It's flowing water. They've read online that as long as it's flowing water, they can be on there.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is anybody can post anything online, and you can't go say you can't take that to court. And judge said, well, here so and so said it was perfectly legal.
Yeah,
Facebook said it was okay.
They're not the ones who would be paying your fine.
Yeah,
Right.
so big fish hog 1 2 3
Exactly.
on this thread said this.
It is preferable to get the actual rules and regulations and laws before you do that, because whatever so and so says online is not legal defense.
Yeah.
So where the road crosses the Spring Creek, the highway department has a right of way for a highway there. Does not necessarily mean people have a right of way to go down there and go fish.
Mm.
And then the highway right of way is generally only 10 feet off the side of the road. So once you get off that property, then you're definitely on somebody's private property. And most all that is already posted. It says no trespassing. So at that point, there's no way you can say, "Oh, I was mistaken. I didn't know where I was at." Well,
Right.
You passed 5 signs that said you no trespassing. How did you not notice that you were trespassing on somebody else's property?
Right.
So that's where it comes into criminal trespass, and the sheriff's office come down there and deal with it however they have to.
Yeah.
So it is, like I said, it's not black and white. For instance, on the Illinois River, you can be out there on the Illinois River where it borders Weddington Wildlife Management Area because that's public property. You have full permission to be out there. And right now, as low as the Illinois River is, that it's hard to go float that river without dragging bottom somewhere.
Yeah. You're gonna
Well,
get out
as soon
and
as
push a little bit.
you're dragging, you're trespassing on somebody else's property. And so whether the landowner is inclined to prosecute or not is up to them because it's their property. So
You're talking about where the Illinois, one half of it is national forest, one half of it is private.
you can be on that water there. So if you have 2 separate landowners and you have national forest that owns half the river, and then it's private property on the other half, it goes up to the water edge, to the water mark right there.
Okay.
Not the high water mark, just the water level.
Okay.
But then as soon as you get off of where Weddington borders it, then you're on the private property. And at that point, you have to have permission to be on somebody else's property. Without their permission, you're trespassing.
Yeah.
So it's not in black and white that you can't be on here and you can be on here. You can, as long as you're not touching the bottom, and you don't touch the bottom on private property, you can be on some of that water. But then on other areas, you cannot. So it would be much easier if all that was spelled out in black and white. But
Right.
we have so many different creeks and streams and everything in the state of Arkansas, it would be impossible to go through there and name out, okay,
So many.
you can't be on this person's property, but you can on this property here.
Yeah.
So it's just difficult to do that.
So navigability is really kind of the letter of the law. If a river has been deemed navigable by
Correct.
whatever county court or some
And the
body.
and the problem with that is it may change. If you could go find a list, it may be accurate today. And then next week, a judge may have overruled somebody else's previous ruling and it's no longer navigable. Or there may be 3 other creeks on there named navigable. So it changes so often that it's hard to be completely 100% accurate on that every day and know those things.
Yeah.
So it's just general. It's a general rule of thumb. Ask the landowners, hey, can I go down there and float? And I will pick up all my trash.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to violate any laws. I'm not going to tear up any of your property. More than likely, they're going to say, yeah, that's fine. No problem.
Right.
So just, go out there and be sincere and ask permission and ensure that you don't leave any trash, don't tear anything up. And that way, if you can do that, then probably you're going to have a place to go for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
As long as that landowner still owns it, you're go out there and clean up any trash you find and fix any problems you see. That generally you'll be better off that way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's helpful. And I'll admit, it's easy to make the mistake. I've made the mistake before, and I've been asked to leave. And it is just what I've learned from those encounters is it's always better to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that you can really be sure is to either ask for permission from the landowner there, or to call ahead to someone like you or a game warden who knows specifically that area. And just in general, that is probably the best way to go about things.
And just safer. you don't get shot at.
much safer.
What about corner hopping? I know it's a big deal out west. It gets a lot of traction.
Yeah, and lately that's kind of been something that's popped up in the news and as far as like the outdoor world is there was some recent cases that were happening out in maybe Wyoming or Montana or something.
A lot of that property out there is completely different than what we have over here. The majority of public property in Arkansas is big tracts of property, and over there it's weird. They have like it looks like a checkerboard. It's public property, private, public, private. And the corner hopping over there is it doesn't really apply to Arkansas because we don't have that type topography. We don't have that type of public and private, public, private checkerboard.
It's just a big chunk of
generally all of ours is like Weddington. You have 16,000 acres out there that nearly all of it can be accessed by if you parked right in the dead center of it, you could walk to nearly every last bit of that. Same thing with McElroy WMA, Ozark National Forest, White Rock, nearly all of that. I mean, there's little pieces of in-holdings here or there that are private property that are surrounded by public or public property that are surrounded by private. The issue is that unless there was a legal easement deemed for that, then just because it's public property does not necessarily mean you have permission to access it, because if it's surrounded by all private landowners and they say stay out, then you can't legally cross their property to get onto that public property.
Right.
So it's there are in-holdings like that in the state of Arkansas, but it's not that big of an issue because generally those are smaller areas. They're a lot fewer, and we don't have the checkerboard type land that they do out west.
Yeah, that makes sense. The case that I think that I was referencing that I heard about is like it was specific too because there were fence posts, there were lines, and there was like they climbed over the corner. They even had a ladder, so they never even put foot on the ground on the private land, and they climbed over it. But then the landowners sued, or they claimed that at some point you were basically in my private land airspace, and in doing so you trespassed.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like that's
that. We don't have that in Arkansas. It's generally not like that. We don't have that type of private public checkerboard property.
Yeah.
So we don't have that.
That makes sense.
That does make sense.
What about a harvesting of a non-game species that Arkansas Game and Fish may or may not even recognize as a species in Arkansas?
Okay.
Thinking mountain lion specifically.
Mountain lions.
Call it.
But there could be others. I'm not sure.
There was a mountain lion killed in, I think it was Chico County. It was southeast Arkansas about 5-6 years ago. We don't have a native population that is reproducing in the state of Arkansas. It is. We have seen that there are some occasionally pass through the state because that one that was killed in Chico County was I think they checked the DNA on it and figured it came from South Dakota area.
Yes.
That's
and
what
so
Myron
we were
was
talking
telling
with
us.
Myron about this.
They travel huge areas
That's
looking
crazy.
for territory of their own. And I think they're in around the city of St. Louis. They've had like 6 or 7 hit by cars and killed. I mean, St. Louis does not have a reproducing population of mountain lions there, but it's a corridor that those animals cross from South Dakota, go across Missouri, go across Illinois into Indiana, Wyoming, West Virginia, those areas. I mean, they cross through some of those areas because they travel just hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
So there are some that pass through here occasionally. It's not something. I've been doing this 26 years. I've never seen one.
Yeah.
I've seen some big bobcats. I've never seen a mountain lion.
Some really big house cats.
Yes,
people
really big
swear.
house cats. And that's the thing is we get a lot of calls of, hey, there's a mountain lion out here on my property. Okay, do you know how big a mountain lion really is? It may look like, if you look at a picture, just take a picture and look at a tabby house cat, I can see the resemblance of it. But then wherever you start, I had, for instance, a guy call me up and sent me a picture a couple months ago. Said, hey, we had a report that this was over Oklahoma mountain lion. And it was standing next to a 20-pound propane tank. And it was about the same height as that propane tank. I said, well, your propane tank's about 1.5 feet tall. And I said, a mountain lion is about 4 feet tall at its back.
Yeah.
They're nowhere near the same size. I said, if that's a house cat.
Yeah.
And
That's sprinkles the
then
house
People
cat.
just want to believe.
whenever they look at it that way and think, well, yeah, that makes sense. And at one time, we used to have some cutouts of a life-size cutout of a mountain lion. And so if somebody had a game camera picture that said, oh, there's a mountain lion cross through here, We could go set up the life-size cutout of a mountain lion is made out of plywood, set it up there and take another picture and compare the two size pictures and say, yeah, that thing is 3 times the size of that house cat that passed through here. There's no way in the world that's a mountain lion.
Yeah.
So it is, your eyes can play tricks on you on some of that stuff. But getting back to, let's say, for instance, you are in the woods and you are being stalked by a mountain lion. If you can articulate how you are protecting yourself, your family, and you have to shoot it and kill it, then there's not going to be an issue with it. You're not going to get arrested. You're not going to go to jail over it. You're not going to be able to keep it. But you have the right to protect yourself and your family.
Right.
So if that happens, and that's what the hunter down in South Arkansas said, it was stalking him and he shot it and killed it. I don't think he received a citation or anything. He didn't get to keep it, but he had the right to protect himself. So there are some of those things that cross through here. And if like I said, if you're protecting yourself, then that's just part of it. And for instance, elk, we have elk here in the state of Arkansas, but they're only, the elk zone is only certain counties in northeast or northwest Arkansas.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, they changed the regulations so that there were elk that had gotten out of high fenced enclosures down in southwest Arkansas, south central Arkansas, different areas. They changed our regulation that during deer season, if you are outside of the elk zone counties and you witness an elk, then you could kill it, so that it was limiting the exposure of these animals to the wild native animals in that area. So there are different. It's the regulations. You just have to read the regulation book and get that information.
Mm-hmm.
So now, say you're hunting in Madison County and you're somewhat close to where the elk zone is, and an elk wanders off of the elk zone or out of the elk zone.
Unless you are a permit holder during the elk hunt, that's the only time you could kill one in Madison County, Carroll County, Boone County, Newton County, Searcy County. And I would have to look at just the list just to make sure of all the counties exactly for sure. But yeah, if you're anywhere in Madison County, you would have to be during the permit hunt and be a permit holder in order to kill an elk over there.
Okay.
Because that is part of the elk zone.
If you were outside of the elk zone, though.
So if you're in Washington County and you have a
I don't even know if it's possible for an elk to walk up into Washington County, but
we had elk reports of elk over in western Washington County. It's been 15 years ago, and I think that they finally decided that they had come from the elk herd over in Oklahoma. They had come from over there, and they were here for a couple months, and then
really?
Hunting season started up, and people started being out in the woods, and those things took off.
Yeah, they went back.
Yeah, they went back to Oklahoma. So there are elk that roam outside of our general area where they're wanting them to stay at, and for the elk zones. So if you're in, let's say, for instance, you go down to Faulkner County in central Arkansas, well outside this elk zone, and you're out deer hunting, and the elk walks out in front of you, and it's during deer season, you could kill it down there. You can only kill one a year, but you could shoot it and kill it. If you're legally hunting on that property, you have permission to be there, and it's during deer season, you could shoot it and kill it, and check it, and you could keep the elk. They would test it just for CWD, just to make sure it wasn't carrying CWD, but
right.
you could keep the elk meat. So that wouldn't be any issue with that.
Interesting. Okay, I've got one here that's I'm just kind of going through this list here. This is one that and you may not see a whole lot of trapping up here. I know less and less people trap all the time, but say you're out and you're snaring, you're by the book, you've got a snare set up and you're setting a coyote snare and maybe it's in a fence and you're on the bottom third of the...
Well, if you have a snare in a fence, then you're illegal at that point.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just on a trail.
If it can touch the fence, then it's illegal.
Okay.
When it's fully extended. Let's say, for instance, it's on a trail, you have a snare out there.
Yeah, you got a snare up there, and maybe it's so it's within the 10 inches or so that it's off the ground, and a deer were to stick its head down in there and get hung up in it. How would that situation be handled, or should it be handled?
Well, and I've actually seen it happen before.
Okay.
So, for instance, snares, they have to have, if you're not snaring in the water, you have to have deer stops on it. It prevents it from going too tight and killing the deer. It's asphyxiating them.
Yeah.
So
if it's
the
on
deer,
if it's on the foot though, right? Because the deer stop is only so big. Like if
well,
it were
and
to
I've
go
seen
around
it,
their
I've
neck,
seen it around and get around their heads.
Yeah, okay.
It doesn't necessarily kill them. Sometimes it will, but not necessarily. Most of your trappers have catch poles, so they'll have like a 6 foot long pole that has a snare on the end of it. They can get around the deer's head, and if say for instance it's on the leg, they can get that snare around the deer's head and then tighten it up and hold that pole so it is stretching the deer out. Then they can reach back there and step on the leg and get that snare off the deer's leg, and then turn loose that pole. And by that time, the deer is generally so worn out that they're not fighting as much.
Yeah.
If they've been in that trap for an hour, then they have spent their reserves of energy. And a couple of times when I've come across a deer that's been hung up in a snare, they're laying on the ground. Now I wouldn't want to go out there and go pet them because you're still liable to get kicked. And those things can cut you pretty quick. But if you have the proper equipment and you've at least seen some training on it, you can generally figure out how to get those things out of a snare. As long as you have the catch pole, and most of your coyote trappers have those things.
Yeah.
Because they'll also a lot of times they'll trap domestic dogs in there. And your friendly Labrador, if it gets a snare around it, those things turn mean real quick.
Yeah, they're not so friendly.
And as soon as you let the snare loose, then they're right back to being just your happy-go-lucky dog.
Yeah.
But whenever they get cornered in that snare, they will get angry. Just any dog will.
Yeah.
But that's where they use those catch poles. They can get that snare around their necks and get their mouth away from their legs or whatever, get the trap off their leg and then turn it loose. And at that point, they take off and they're fine.
What if a deer were to die in a snare?
Then they need to call a game of fish, and then the officer will come out and can basically see what's going on, ensure that there was a deer stop on the snare, ensure that all regulations were covered on that, and then if everything was fine, there's no violations found there, they can issue a transport tag for it and can give deer away.
Yeah.
So that it's. There's going to be some bycatch in trapping. It's just part of it.
I think that's kind of understood.
Yeah, and it's as long as you are doing trapping ethically, legally, you're limiting your bycatch of what you're going to catch in those things. And as long as you have the proper equipment, even if you do catch a deer in there, a lot of times they can be turned loose alive, and they're an hour later they're fine.
Yeah.
Right. So there are going to be some kills like that. The deer will get so bent out of shape that it ends up just having a heart attack and dies, or whatever, for whatever reason it dies. Then they call a game of fish and they'll send an officer out to make sure there's no violations, everything's fine. Then they can issue a transport tag and that's it.
Yeah.
Officer Ruby, I want to be sensitive with your time. I got one more for you, and I don't know if Kyle has one final to finish it up. But thinking about your average law-abiding citizen trying to do everything by the book, the camp I squarely put myself in, despite Kyle's crazy stories about our fishing years ago.
We've made mistakes, man.
We're learning.
It's okay.
Say you do something that you know you've messed it up, wasn't intentional. Where's your wisdom on that? Say you're turkey hunting first time, you get a Jake, you get a hen. I don't know.
Well, we've had,
what's the policy
for
there?
instance, it's you can kill one deer or one turkey a day. We've had a couple times that people have shot a turkey and there's another turkey back behind it they may not have seen. And they go out there to go pick up their turkey, and guess what? 20 yards back behind it, there's another turkey laying dead.
2 turkeys.
And so what I would suggest is call up Game of Fish, the number on your dispatch number on your license, and explain the situation. They'll have an officer come out. We had one happen this past year. It was a younger hunter had done it. I think they got a warning citation just saying we spoke to them, and it's basically, hey, don't do this again. And they did not get to keep the second turkey, but the first turkey, they were fine. Didn't ever pay a fine, didn't get points on their license or anything like that. So honesty is the best policy. We've had, back when we had the 3-point rule up here, which we don't now because of CWD, but back when we did, we would have people that would kill what they thought was a doe, and then they get up there and it was a spike that had 2.5-inch spikes on there, which was illegal at the time. So they'd call up and say, hey, I did this. It was shooting 150 yards away. I thought it was a doe, and it was out there with 4 other deer. I would have sworn it was a doe, and sure enough, it was a spike. They'll go out there and inspect the situation. If they can see, like I said, a lot of common sense plays into this. An officer gets out there and realizes, hey, I can see how this happened. It was an accident. It was not intentional. they may or may not, they may get a citation out of the deal, but at the same time, it's going to be a minimum citation, or they may just get a warning, or they may, if it was just one of those dumb luck deals, I was shooting at this deer, killed this one, and there's a spike back behind it 50 yards I didn't see, the bullet went through, killed it. Then, there's different situations. They're handled differently, but honesty is always your best policy on that. There's going to be some grace granted on if you go out there and say, look, I messed up. It was a mistake. I'm asking for you to come out here and check this out. I messed up, and I'll take whatever happens. Then generally there's going to be some grace granted on that.
Mm-hmm.
So just honesty is the best policy.
Sure.
Call in and admit to it. And then, because hunting is a way for everybody to go out there and relax. That's when I used to deer hunt a lot, I wanted to be able to go out there and relax. And if I'm always having to look over my shoulder to make sure that somebody's not watching me, or make sure that somebody's not catching up with me, you can't relax whenever you're out there having to do that. So it's, you don't want to go out there and mess up. I know most people don't want to mess up, even if when there were violations. Most of the time it was accidental. Sometimes it was intentional, but if it was accidental, then be honest about it, and it'll get handled as easily as possible. And then you don't have to sit there and look over your shoulder for the next 6 months thinking, well, is Game Warden going to come talk to me today? It's been handled.
My granddad has this story where I think he's going duck hunting for the first time, and he lives around here, so like duck's not part of his deal. And he went through and like triple checked all the right regulations. It was like, I'm feeling good. Yeah. First day they get out there, warden shows up, and everybody in the boat but him is good because he didn't. I don't know if he purchased the $7 duck stamp or whatever. And, it's one of those like, so sorry, you tried your best. I got to write you up. It's not a big deal. And he always tells that story actually out of appreciation. Like, I'm glad that we have Game and Fish that cares about our resources and our safety and all the things. And they're willing to do the due diligence. But it's always one of his stories, and he's always telling stories.
Well,
like,
and
hey, check your stuff.
Yeah. For instance, your license fees go back to trout stamps.
Mm-hmm.
That is directly what pays for the stocking of more trout into those rivers. So that if you go out there and you're the only one that's buying a trout stamp, and the other 50 people out there fishing or not don't have it, then they're basically using the same resource that you paid in extra towards. So if you're going to go out there and use a resource, make sure you pay for it, because it ensures that everybody has an opportunity to go out there and do it. You're sharing the cost across everybody.
Right.
I don't know what it would cost to go to the store and buy a trout, but I bet it's a whole lot more than the $7 trout stamp is.
It has to be.
And you can go for a full year and go out there and with your fishing license and go catch trout.
Mm-hmm.
So cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to end on this, just in general, thinking about your role and the significance of a game warden in our state. How important is conservation to you, and to the role of a game warden to conservation? How important is that, and why do we need to protect and enforce the laws on our landscape and in our home that we call the Ozarks? Why is that important?
Well, and we discussed it earlier. The wildlife management, they look at the populations, they look at the current estimates of what the population is, how many people are hunting, disease, and things like that. They make their recommendations for hunting limits and seasons. Fisheries does the same thing, and then they present it to the commission. The commission approves it. Those become regulations. Those estimates are based upon everybody following the rules and regulations. And then if they just said, okay, let's say, for instance, there was the population of deer in Arkansas only supported everybody go out and kill 1 buck per year.
Right.
Now, that's not the case, but let's just give that as an example. If they made that an estimate, but there was no enforcement arm, then what's to say that, hey, the regulation is you can only kill 1 buck per year? What's going to keep guy from down the street from going out and killing 15 bucks if he knows that there's no enforcement comes back upon that? So what our job is basically to ensure that the regulations that are proposed scientifically, because they're not just going out there willy-nilly saying, oh, yeah, this is what we want. There's scientific method behind all this. They look at populations, they make estimates, they do their best to figure out how is the best way to manage the population of what it said animal on this area. So each zone may have its own different regulation, and there's a reason behind that. Is that there are food sources here that they're not in this other zone. There's more population here. There's more people hunting here. So those are some of the different regulations. So the scientific method behind that to come up with their estimates and their regulations if they made a regulation but there was no enforcement arm behind it, then all that is for naught, because like I said, there's nothing to ensure that somebody's going to follow those regulations. So we go out there, and enforcement is part of we could not do our job without wildlife management and fisheries. They could not effectively do their job without us as well. So we're all part of a team that ensures that what they're doing is effectively administered to the public, and what we're doing is scientifically backed, because we're not just going to make regulations just for the heck of it. We're out there to ensure that the reason that they've made the regulation is we're out there to ensure that their regulations are followed. So we're all part of a team on that. So it is, like I said, we all have our own jobs, but they all cross over among each other. Without us, their job would be for naught. Without them, we couldn't do our job effectively.
Yeah.
So I mean, it all plays together, and it all has to work together in order. And when it works together well, then your wildlife is going to be there for you and the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. When it doesn't work well, then you may see, just for instance, like the American bison. There was millions and millions and millions of them back in the 1800s, and now there's a couple thousand of them across the U.S. native. The native bison that were here, not stock, not wildlife, or not cattle.
Yeah, not domesticated.
Yeah, and so without some of the regulation, without enforcement, then you can have overhunting and just completely wipe out, decimate a population. Arkansas didn't have hardly any bears for nearly a century after commercial hunting wiped them out. Then we finally got bears back in the state of Arkansas, and now we got a lot of bears. They keep raising the quota every year because we have more and more bears in the state of Arkansas. So I mean, we all work together in order to ensure that everybody has a chance to go out there and enjoy the wildlife, the resources of the state of Arkansas. Not just us, but your kids, your kids' kids, your kids' kids' kids. I mean, everybody is going to have the chance to go out there and do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty cool to hear it put like that you guys both work in tandem. The scientists, the biologists, the enforcement, it all has to work for the science to happen, for what we believe to happen behind the science, for all that to come true. There has to be an enforcement arm of it. I guess I said last question. This is really my last one.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is thinking about becoming a game warden? What kind of advice would you give to them?
You have to be self-motivated. We are different than your normal law enforcement. As a captain of this district, I may not see all my officers, but maybe once a month. And then my lieutenant and my sergeants, they may only see the officers in their posts or the district maybe once every couple of weeks. We don't do like your normal PD where they show up at their office and say, okay, this is your assignment for today. You go do this, you go do this, you'll go do this. As a officer, as a game warden in the state of Arkansas, you're on duty 5 days a week. You're subject to call. But at the same time, you may not get a phone call for 2 weeks during the slow time of the year, but you still have a job to do to go out there and do it. So you have to be a self-motivated self-starter. I know a lot of people who are very good law enforcement officers that could not handle the freedom of this job because they want to have, they want to have somebody telling them, this is what I don't want you to do today. This is what I want you to do today. They're not necessarily, they could not motivate themselves to get up at 4:00 in the morning during deer season and go out there and check deer hunters until 10 a.m. and then go home and go eat lunch, go do whatever, and then go back out in the evening. They could not do that. So you have to be motivated to have that internal drive to go do it yourself. And I said it earlier, you have to be able to communicate with people. If your ability to communicate and talk to people will get you through this job better than anything else. You have to have the desire to be a public servant. We're not in this job to get rich. I wish we were, but that's just not the case. So you have to have the desire to want to go out there and help the public and to serve the public. And that's our main job is yes, we're out there checking hunting and fishing license, but we're not there to be heavy-handed about it. We're there as a service to the rest of the public to ensure that everybody is getting equal opportunity to partake in the resources of the state.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very cool. Well, Bill, we appreciate your time, and thank thank you again for letting us come here to the Nature Center. It's a super cool place. Have enjoyed getting to talk with you and kind of break down some sensitive subjects, topics where people don't always know what to ask or what to say.
And we appreciate what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
We benefit from it.
No problem.
Absolutely.